Hi everybody, my name is Nikki Adams and I'm going to be talking to you today about the impact of Kuru and vCJD in the world. So the infectious agent responsible for this host of diseases is none other than the infamous prion. So a prion is a misfolded host-encoded prion protein, or PRP. Essentially, it is an infectious protein particle. So on the left-hand side, I provided a picture of a normal prion protein. Now PRP is actually a 253 amino acid chain of amino acids. And you can see the distinct kind of ringlet structure of the prion protein, and those are the A helices. Now on the left-hand side, the right-hand side, I have a picture of an abnormal prion protein, and you can see the distinct changes in the structure of these proteins with these green kind of flat places on the right-hand side. Those are actually the beta-plated sheets. So you can see the distinct misfolding characteristic from the normal prion protein to the infectious abnormal prion protein, which we simply call a prion. Now, PRP in its normal state, we're not really sure as to what its function is within the body, although most specialists today speculate that it has something to do with neurological signaling within the body, especially because even though PRP is found in most of the body's tissues, it's primarily within the tissues involved with the nervous system, so that's going to be mostly in the brain. So these prions, the pathogenic prion, is actually responsible for a host of diseases, which we call the transmissible spongiform encephalopathies, and all of these are fatal neurodegenerative diseases. So we're not really sure what causes or what incites the misfolding or even the process of the misfolding, so I'm not going to be able to answer a lot of questions about the specifics. However, I've provided a good picture of, on this screen, of what we do know about the mechanism. So as I explained before, you have this conversion from the A helices of the normal PRP protein to the beta-plated sheets in the misfolded or prion. So then you have basically this prion, once whether that it sporadically arises or you've contracted it, it's in your body, and then it goes to different PRP proteins within your cells, and it in some way incites them to also misfold, and then you have this cascade of consequences with all of these prions forming or misfolding, and then they condense into what we call plaques, which you can see on the bottom right hand picture on your screen. You have these plaques where these prions have essentially condensed, and that then causes the spongiform degeneration, which you can see in the middle picture on the bottom of the screen, and that's what then leads to the symptoms that arise from Kuru, and then eventually death, which I'll discuss later in this presentation. So this is a slide that goes over kind of the categorization that we have presently. Since prions, the prion was really only named in the 80s, we still are kind of confused on how to categorize these diseases because of the nature of the disease and how mysterious it is. But essentially we differentiate them based on whether they sporadically occurred, whether they're hereditary, or they're acquired. So sporadic occurrence actually makes up the majority of these prion diseases, but even then prion diseases really are actually quite rare, and we only have about 2 cases being reported for every 1 million people in a population. So it's still very rare, but as you can see in the pie graph, the sporadic cases are the ones that are going to make up the majority of the prion diseases. So sporadic, actually, as the name implies, it really just occurs, spontaneously, and we're not sure how it happens, but you go from normal one day, and then the next day. Next category is going to be the hereditary prion diseases, and those are actually a bit complicated because they involve some sort of mutation in your genome, on the gene that encodes for the PRP protein. Perhaps you have some sort of a mutation which actually begins coding for the pathogenic PRP protein. So then instead of producing normal PRP proteins, you're producing the pathogenic form. And so it's more of a hereditary, it's more hereditary. So your family may have a tendency to have this mutation, and so you're therefore going to have a tendency to develop this disease. So this is going to be your at-risk population. So the last category, which is where I'm going to focus most of my time on this presentation, is the acquired the acquired human prion diseases, and these are the ones that include Kuru and the variant form of CJD. And these are going to be those which you have, as the name states again, you have acquired this prion. And these are actually the smallest percentage of human prion diseases. All right, so we have today, we're going to be talking about Kuru, more specifically in Papua New Guinea. So on the left side of the screen, I have included a picture of Dr. Michael Alpers, who was one of he was an Australian doctor, and he was primarily responsible for the investigation of Kuru in the Foray linguistic group of Papua New Guinea. So, and then on the right side of the screen, you can see a picture of a young native child who has contracted Kuru. And you can see by his unresponsive state, as well as the stiffness of his muscles and his inability to walk. So, Kuru actually kind of gained not an international standpoint, but definitely from the Australians who heard of this disease that was essentially wiping out women and children within the Foray linguistic group, which is a portion of Papua New Guinea, so much to the point that they were actually they were very worried about the idea of extinction because there were so few women in that group. So Dr. Michael Alpers and his team went there to go and investigate. So these are some of the facts witnessed by Dr. Michael Alpers during his time in Papua New Guinea. He noticed that women were 8 to 9 times more likely, women and children, to contract the disease than men, and that this Kuru was only affecting the tribes within the Foray linguistic region of Papua New Guinea. So the symptoms that he also saw were extreme shaking, uncontrollable laughter, inability to walk, pain in the joints and lower extremities, inability to swallow, unresponsiveness to external stimuli, and development of deep ulcers, which usually ended up becoming infected, causing, which was one of the things that caused the end result, which was death. He also noticed ritualistic cannibalism within the population. So ritualistic cannibal, just a brief explanation of that, the natives of the tribe believed that it was disrespectful to bury their deceased loved ones, so instead they would consume the bodies of their deceased loved ones. So the men typically would consume the muscles, whereas the women and children were thought to be the most pure of the tribe, so they were the only ones who were allowed to consume the brain, because that's where they believed the soul of their deceased loved one resided. So Dr. Michael Alpers was discovering all of these different connections, and after many years and through many tests involving transmission procedures from the deceased to, actually they used monkeys, they noticed that there was a direct transmission, and when they transferred tissue from the deceased members of the tribes to the monkeys developed Kuru in the same way as the natives of the tribe. So they ended up discovering that, and especially with the development of the name prion in the 80s and our current knowledge, we've discovered that it's actually a prion that was causing this problem within the Foray linguistic tribe, and it was primarily through the ritualistic cannibalism that it actually became such a problem. So patient 0 would have had this sporadic form of the disease where it just arose spontaneously, not really sure what happened, and then because they would consume the body, and prions actually reside in the body very long after death. So they would consume the body, ingest the prion, and then the prion would make its way to the brain and would then go about its ways and would actually end up killing the person. And so this kind of produced a cascade of consequences, as I stated earlier. However, ritualistic cannibalism ended in the 50s and the 60s, so we're hoping that Kuru will end as a disease within the next generation. So lastly, I'm going to be talking about vCJD and its outbreak in the United Kingdom. So vCJD, or variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, actually infected 175 individuals in the UK beginning in 1996, with 49 other cases reported in other countries until up to March 2011. So originally this occurred in the UK in the 90s, and although there's still some speculation on this, many believe that it was caused by the consumption of meat, specifically of bovine origin, that was contaminated with bovine spongiform encephalopathy, which is actually mad cow disease, which is also a prion. So essentially what happened was this was going from what we saw in Kuru, which is human-to-human transmission, to animal-to-human transmission, both of which is through consumption of what holds the prion. So this vCJD is actually the human form of mad cow disease. Now, in later years, and including four cases of which have been confirmed in the United States in the mid-2000s, we believe that some of these cases were caused by blood transfusions, which came from blood that was donated by individuals who had consumed this contaminated meat. So this vCJD is actually very similar to Kuru in the formation of plaques in the brain, which is found through post-mortem autopsies, as well as the expression of the symptoms that were seen with Kuru. So we actually think that these are probably going to be the same strain of prion. However, at the time of both of these incidents, no one really put them together due to the great distances of the region and the mystery behind it. So how does this relate to us now? Well, at this point, we don't have a cure or a vaccine, and there's so much mystery involving the prion that we're kind of a bit at a loss on what to do at this point, although there is significant research involved in the understanding of prions, because you can kind of think of this as the last frontier, or not the last frontier, but one of the great frontiers of infectious diseases, because we've discovered this new infectious agent, and there's still so much to be heard about, or so much to be understood about it. So as to prevention, ritualistic cannibalism ended in the Foray region in the 60s. So we're hoping that this will end the continuation of Kuru within that region. And as to the incident in the UK, better preparations of meat, as well as regulations concerning the quality of the meat for consumption, as well as the feed for animals, was implemented, as well as better screening for individuals who had donated blood. So we're definitely taking preventative measures to try and make this less of an impact for future generations. However, prion diseases account for, whenever they do infect an individual, their mortality rate is going to be 100% after symptoms have arisen. So although very rare, it is still a very dangerous disease, and measures are being taken currently to try and understand more about it, so as to be able to develop a prevention or a treatment method for the future. So these are my references I used for this presentation, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. See you Monday. Actually, on a world standpoint, the Pakistani population actually is going to be is one of those at-risk populations. And in one such study that I found, 909 Pakistanis were involved in this study, and they found that 63% of them had this mutation for encoding the pathogenic prion.